Good morning and welcome to another edition of Salam Media Highlights with me, Salalo Makwidere, coming to you live from Johannesburg. You tuned into your home of humanitarian journalism, Salam Media, where we bring you the latest of all that you need to know when it comes to the world around you. Today, we'll be delving into a somewhat heated debate. This is surrounding the proposed renaming of Sandton Drive to honor Leila Khaled. For those that don't know Leila Khaled, she somewhat of an iconic figure in the Palestinian liberation movement. This proposal has sparked significant support from various communities and organizations, including ANC, Al Jamaa, and COSATU, who gathered to show their backing. However, the DA has raised concerns, accusing Johannesburg's MMC for Community Development, this is Kabelo Kwamanda, of collecting what they call duplicate or unauthored submissions to bolster support. While over 60,000 petitions were collected in favor, the DA claims this process undermines democratic principles. And joining us today is DA's Leah Potgieter, who's here to share her perspective on this debate. And to answer, I think, the question on everyone's lips, is the DA trying to, block the renaming and trying to mute the broader, support for the renaming of Sandton Drive, which to many it might look like it, but they have their reasons. Leah, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning.
Thanks for having me, and good morning to your listeners.
I think first and foremost, Democratic Alliance has raised concerns about alleged irregularities in the submission process and calling for an audit. But with thousands expressing their support, could the DA be seen as disregarding the strong sentiment in honor of, in favor of honoring Leila Khaled and the broader Palestinian cause here in South Africa?
Look, I can see how it could be construed that way, but the bottom line is the public participation process underlines our constitution, and that hasn't been followed in this particular, process or proposal of renaming Sandton Drive. And Kobela Komanda himself stated that the public participation process is basically a box-ticking exercise, and that they've already decided to do this. So they went out to seek, I'm not sure what from the public, because it definitely wasn't their mandate and it definitely wasn't their views on this particular renaming, because they stated that they'd made this decision prior to that. This is a huge governance issue. It undermines the constitution, which is the overarching legislation over every single sphere of government in this country. And it sets a very dangerous precedent going forward, where governments just want to do what they feel like doing instead of getting the mandate from the people that they serve. Essentially, those people are who elected them into office. I do think that this particular issue with regards to the renaming is problematic in several different instances. The first is that it doesn't comply with the city's renaming policy, which states that, as far as possible, they should, not go and rename streets after living people, which Leila Khaled is very much still alive. They should also rename streets in an attempt at unity and reconciliation, which, as you can see from the different opinions to this renaming, that there's very much a conflict over whether or not it's supported or it's, rejected. And that's really what we're saying, is that the city of Johannesburg, their aim should be to reconcile and unify the residents of Joburg, and they should be listening to all of them, not just one interest group or, a few of them, or an interest group that suits their purposes. And we're really questioning what is the object or the aim around renaming Sandton Drive, which is not an offensive name, which is another aspect of the naming policy that they're contravening.
Would the Democratic Alliance accept the renaming of Sandton Drive to Leila Khaled Drive if all the boxes that you mentioned and every part of the criteria was met to the T? Would you accept it and let it be?
Well, I think, the objections that we've received, or the participation that's been had with residents and particularly businesses around Sandton and the greater Joburg, because we actually got a lot of input from, outside of Sandton as well, was that, there was nothing wrong with the name change or the name of Sandton Drive. It's going to create huge financial implications, particularly for businesses, and who's going to then have to cover that is the employees of these businesses, and they employ tens of thousands of people, across the city. It's also going to create confusion, which will lead to losses around income, and various other financial implications of having to change their details at the deeds office. The city's going to have to go out and change software around, emergency services. They're going to have to do street naming. They're going to have to do road painting. There's a lot of financial implication here, and that is what they've raised. The other issue is that we are a very, very, multicultural, diverse society, and any aims at renaming should really be to, reflect that. And it would appear that from the minute this started, it created a conflict within the society within Joburg, within different communities, and it's creating arguments that weren't there to begin with. The other issue, as a lot of people are bringing up, is why, when we have so many South African heroes, I mean, we've just seen, the unfortunate passing of, figures such as Tito Mboweni or Pravin Gordhan. Why are they not being honored? They are, in fact, they've contributed to South Africa holistically. And whereas we understand that Leila Khaled has probably contributed to the freedom of some, particularly within Palestine, she's not a South African hero per se to the masses within Joburg.
Just beyond, maybe the question of submissions, the DA has voiced opposition to honoring Leila Khaled due to her somewhat controversial actions in the past. How does the DA approach balancing these complexities with the ideals of liberation, particularly when so many South Africans are empathizing with the Palestinian resistance?
Well, I think, of course we empathize. We empathize with lots of different countries and lots of different groups that are experiencing, what they are, and it's happening across the globe. But we also, within our own renaming policies, have strict prescripts to honor South African heroes who have contributed, massively to our freedom, to our reconciliation, to our democracy. And that is what renaming is really about. And the premise starts on, offensive road names, which we've had. I mean, there was the renaming of William Nicol to Winnie Mandela Drive. That went over quite smoothly. Everybody was, quite happy with it. It didn't create any controversy. And I think because, within the national context, there is a deep knowledge, a deep, what would you call it, affiliation to South African heroes. And I think that's really the problem here, is that we're dealing with somebody who possibly, some groups would consider as their hero. She's generally still a living person and doesn't, comply with the renaming policy, and B, doesn't affiliate or speak to the general populace.
One thing that I want to touch on, and this is one thing that you've also mentioned yourself, is Kabelo Kwamanda. You've mentioned concerns over his alleged involvement with fraud, which is an ongoing case. It's currently in court, which you yourselves, the Democratic Alliance, argue could impact the democratic processes. Is it fair to link a potential administrative misstep, according to you, to community-driven public support for the renaming? Does the DA risk maybe politicizing this process more than it should?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Gwamanda was removed from office as the executive mayor by his own coalition partners due to a lack of confidence. He failed to be able to address severe issues throughout the city, including the Bree Street explosion as an example. And they removed him from office and then appointed him as the MMC of Community Development. And oddly enough, the claims that we had, and this was from seeing some of the objections that they had collected, some were missing names. They had generic signatures on them. Some of them didn't even have any details. It was a written paragraph with no name, no surname, no contact details, no signature. So this happened before he was arrested, and knowing that, this has been coming for several months, because it's, the minute he was named executive mayor, the people that he had defrauded obviously recognized him. But I do think, and particularly because he is not, he doesn't seem to have any conscience around his actions. And it is concerning that somebody in a leadership position who doesn't see, wrong versus right. And, when he came to accept these submissions, this was directly after ward councillors within the Sandton constituency had collected submissions. And although we received over 5,500 objections, we also received about 300 odd in support. We submitted all of the submissions, whether they were in support or whether they rejected the proposal, because the idea was to get public participation. The minute these councillors handed those in at Community Development Department, he then announced a city-funded event to meet with one interest group 2 hours before the deadline, and somehow managed to, or claim to have collected almost 100,000 signatures in support, which is completely unprecedented. It almost seems like it's over-exaggerated. Renaming processes do not garner that much, in terms of submissions. And it seems very odd that this happened directly after he saw how many objections had come in against the proposal. Our question is, why not meet with all the interest groups? You are the MMC of Community Development for the whole of Joburg. So invite all interest groups to an event where you get their submissions, whether they be objections or they be in favor of the renaming, and you submit those. But the other issue is, why is the MMC getting involved in the public participation process, which is largely a legislative function, and should be, transparent, and there shouldn't be any interference in that particular, aspect of the process. He then proceeded at that engagement to state that the decision had already been made, and it was basically, they were just collecting these submissions to see what the sentiment is. And it's a contravention of our constitution. As a political leader in the biggest city in the country, he should know better. Public participation is essentially what drives decisions within council. It's not a nice to have after you've already made a decision. So I think his actions, and particularly his lack of, being sorry for, defrauding members of Joburg, and he doesn't actually understand that what he did was wrong. And from what we see from this exercise, he doesn't understand that what he's doing is actually incorrect, or he doesn't care. I'm not quite sure. So I don't think there's any risk from our side. We've seen a number of the submissions, and what we're asking them to do is to do an audit, get an independent auditor in to check the submissions. And, if they are absolutely okay with what's been submitted, and they can contact these people and verify that their submissions are accurate and that they're not fraudulent, then absolutely the independent auditor can provide that outcome to the council. And the councillors who sit there will then be able to make a decision based on a fair public participation process.
How has this request been received by the office of the MMC?
Well, as far as I know, the mayor's put the MMC on special leave, which I'm not sure there's anything, provided for that in law. But, our councillors, as well as the shadow MMC within Joburg, and I think their caucus leader, have also written to the mayor and the city manager following that event, and have received no response, which is exceptionally concerning. And it's why we will be we've taken the matter up at a national level, because it has national implications, and it impacts our trading with our trading partners. It impacts the jobs of various people working within Johannesburg. And it has a big overall impact on people's lives and their sort of acceptance within our multicultural, population. So we've taken it up there, and we will be taking it up through COCTA, for example. But what is very concerning is the fact that both the mayor and the city manager are choosing to ignore the queries from councillors who are just trying to get some sort of clarity on the process.
And just in closing, again, if the audit process does take place, and you do find out that all of the submissions are real, the people have been contacted, the DA would be willing to accept the renaming of Sandton Drive, right? Without any objection.
Look, we've engaged constructively and over several weeks and months with residents, businesses, and we're quite confident that, the general sentiment is not in support of renaming Sandton Drive, because it's not offensive. There are many roads still within, Joburg and the country at large that could be targeted. The bottom line is the Community Development Department itself said it doesn't have the money for this. It's going to go and try and find the money in the Transport Department. Now, the Transport Department cannot fix the roads, the stormwater, the various potholes, the bridges. They don't have money for that. But now they want to take money out to rename a road that wasn't offensive to anybody in the first place. It now becomes a controversial name change that affects people in different ways, both negatively and positively. So we're quite confident that we've done a constructive and, long-reaching process in engaging residents and businesses on this particular issue. That it would be very strange to me if an audit came out and said there was a genuine majority support of this particular renaming process.
So you genuinely don't believe that there's an overwhelming support of the Palestinian cause in Johannesburg and by the residents of the city?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that this particular issue with the renaming of Sandton Drive doesn't garner a lot of support. I'm sure there's a lot of support for various different causes within this country, particularly international causes, and those are valid support. But this particular issue with this renaming is not valid. The process that was followed has been irregular and unlawful. The MMC himself has some sort of alternative agenda in pushing this. I'm not quite sure what it is. But the fact that they cannot answer simple questions from councillors and engage on this matter, and they haven't followed a public participation process that is transparent and fair and open to everybody within Joburg, it just tells you that there is something very, odd going on with this particular process.
All right, we're going to leave it there, Leah. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us the DA's perspective on this, somewhat complex and highly charged issue. We're going to leave it there for now. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
There we go. As we've heard, the proposed rename of Sandton Drive taps into a profound intersection of local sentiment, I think historical legacy, and South Africa's tradition of standing with the global liberation movement. And I think this debate has highlighted questions not only about public participation, but also about how we, as South Africans, or maybe as a society, as residents of the city of Johannesburg, honor symbols of resistance and struggle. And it remains to be seen how the city and its people will navigate these challenges. But one thing is clear, this conversation has ignited a powerful reflection on who we choose to honor and why we'll be following developments closely, and we'll keep you updated. Thank you so much to our listeners for tuning in, and stay tuned to Salam Media to stay informed.
We are here in the middle of a Zahra neighborhood. The whole neighborhood is already destroyed. More than 17 towers are down. Here, as you can see, the firefighters trying their best to help. The people are still under the rubble. A lot of the people.
Join Hamza on his exclusive South African tour as he shares his personal experiences, never before seen footage, and powerful insights on the ongoing genocide in Gaza. This is more than just a talk. It's an invitation to witness Gaza through the lens of Hamza Sha'alan. Don't miss this opportunity to meet the photojournalist who brought Gaza's pain and perseverance to the world in its darkest moments. Follow Salam Media on social media pages for more on this tour and be part of the conversation.